we came here to tell the story of Jacob. We call Yaakov Avinu, Jacob our father, who had a dream of a ladder with angels going up and down. But to tell the story, we have to come here to the Negev desert of Israel, outside of the modern city of Beersheba. The story starts with the words, Vayetze Yaakov me Beersheba, vayelech Harana.
Jacob departed from Beersheba and went to Haran.
And the dream that he had was when he was on the way on his journey from this area where we're standing right now, all the way up to Haran, in the area of southern Turkey, northern Syria, where his uncle Laban lived, where he went to look for a wife, and he ended up actually marrying 4 wives there in Haran. What is this place Beersheba that Jacob is setting out from? How did Jacob end up in Beersheba? So we know that the first person to establish Beersheba was Abraham. Abraham dug a well and he planted an eshel tree. This is the type of tree that we think that Abraham planted, and the reason that we're quite sure that this is the tree is because this is the only kind of tree that grows to any kind of height in this area and provides a lot of shade, and it grows very quickly and reaches great height. And most importantly, this tree has the ability to thrive even in brackish, which means somewhat salty groundwater. So here in the desert, you have areas where there's water, but it's not really drinking water.
Fresh water.
But it has a small salt content that people can't drink. But the eshel tree is able to drink the brackish water, and it does something amazing. It actually excretes the salt through the needles. Don't eat it, it's not edible, but just stick it on your tongue.
Oh yeah.
You taste the salt?
Yeah.
It's covered with salt crystals.
I can feel them also.
Yeah, because it basically, through osmosis, when the dew comes onto the needles, the fresh water pulls the salt out, and then the dew evaporates and the salt is left on the outside. And that's how it's able to survive in the desert, even in salty, brackish water. The founding story is that Abraham dug a well, planted an eshel tree, and established Beersheba.
You know how long the eshel tree lives for?
You want to know if this eshel tree could have been here in Abraham's time?
I'm just, asking questions.
I don't think they lived 3,000 or 4,000 years. I don't think so, but we could imagine.
Great-great-grandson.
Maybe this is a descendant of the eshel tree that Abraham planted in this area. He established a place called Beersheba. He swore an oath with a king named Avimelech, the king of Gerar, that they will not harm one another. And the king of Gerar acknowledged Abraham's sovereignty over this area, and they called it Beersheba, the well of the oath. Sheva in Hebrew could mean 7, or it could mean oath. Shavua is the oath in Hebrew. Abraham had a son named Isaac. Isaac lived here in Beersheba, in this area. And Isaac ended up having twin boys, one named Jacob and one named Esau. And these twin boys had a rivalry from the very beginning. Esau was the firstborn of the 2 twins, but Jacob, Yaakov, came out holding on to the heel of his brother Esau, and because of that, he got the name Yaakov. The word Yaakov or Jacob, it comes from the word ekev in Hebrew. Ekev is the heel of your foot, right? He was holding on to the ekev of Esau, and so he was called Yaakov. They didn't grow up here in Beersheba. They actually grew up further south, out in the Negev, and they lived a nomadic lifestyle under the leadership of their father, Isaac. But there was a famine in the land. Isaac could no longer raise his sheep so far south in the desert, because the further south you get, the more stark the desert is, the less rainfall, and the more harsh it is. So as soon as there's a little bit less rainfall, whereas before maybe he could have scraped out a meager living in that desert, now he had to move further north, and he ended up moving into the city of Gerar, where there was a king by the name of Avimelech. Avimelech's herdsmen who herded flocks in this area started to argue with Isaac's herdsmen. And because of that, Isaac set out on his own and he moved to this area, right outside of what we call Beersheba today. We see down below us the walls of the city of Beersheba from the time of the kings of Judah. Behind us, the modern city of Beersheba, where we live. You can see all the big buildings along Ragar Street, the apartment towers, and the university and the hospital, and all of what we have in the modern city of Beersheba. Did you see our IKEA? We have an IKEA, Rafael.
Every time you want to show me the
We have an IKEA. We're on the map, Beersheba. Forget Abraham was here, Isaac was here, Jacob was here.
IKEA.
We have IKEA, and the food court is kosher.
Yeah, well smells.
You want to go get lunch at IKEA? Have you ever eaten it? Like, maybe they have red lentil soup there. The story that we came to talk about takes place when none of this was here. What was here on this location is probably a camp with tents and herds of goats and sheep and camels and other animals. This is the camp that Isaac established in this area after he left Avimelech. Isaac's herdsmen were running around in the desert looking for places to dig wells. And they dug a well, and then came Avimelech's men and said, no, it's our well, and they stopped it up or stole it. And then they dug another well, and over again, there were fights between the herdsmen of Isaac and the herdsmen of Avimelech. Avimelech came marching out from his city of Gerar with his herdsmen to come make a peace treaty with Isaac. On that same day, while Isaac was sitting with Avimelech arranging the peace treaty, a messenger comes to Isaac and says to him, guess what? We dug a well and we found water.
And the plaster lasted all this long? It's pretty impressive.
Well, it's been refurbished a little bit by the archaeologists. So Isaac names that well Beersheba. It's the same name that Abraham named the well that he dug. But when Abraham named it that, he used the word Sheva to mean 7. Because when he swore an oath with Avimelech, he gave Avimelech 7 kivsot son, 7, lambs, ewes, female lambs, to Avimelech as a sign of the covenant. And so he called it the well of 7 for the 7 lambs. But Isaac called it Beersheba, not the well of the 7, but the well of the oath. Shavua in Hebrew means oath, and Sheva means 7. We're in the desert now.
It was on that very day that Isaac's servants came to him and told him about the well they had dug. And they said to him, we have found water. And he named it Sheba. Therefore, the name of the city is Beersheba until this very day.
If we would go back and look at the story when Abraham dug a well, Abraham calls the actual well Beersheba, the well of the 7. Isaac doesn't call the well Beersheba, he calls it Shiva, from the word Shavua. And the Torah tells us that because of that, the name of this city is Beersheba. The building that we see here over the well, it dates back about 2,800 years ago to the kings of Judah, who built here a walled city to collect taxes from all the nomadic peoples who live in the area and the farmers who live in the area, and also to protect the ascent from the desert up towards the mountain range. And they built this structure over the well, but the well itself may go back all the way to Isaac. To understand why this may be the well that Isaac dug, we have to look very carefully into the text of the Bible.
They received for their heritage Beersheba, Sheba, Malada, Hazara Shaul.
It's a long list. We don't have to read all the cities, but notice something unbelievable there. When it got to the area of Beersheba,
It said Beersheba and Sheba.
in Hebrew it says Beersheba Vasheva. And if you walk down this valley, I've done it with my kids before, you hike for about 2 hours, okay? If you're really in a hurry, maybe 1 hour. You walk down this valley, on the bank of this same stream bed that we have down here, just about an hour down, is the well that's known as the well of Abraham. The Bedouin who live in this area, they call this Tel Asaba. Tel Asaba, the ruin of
Saba.
Saba, Shiva, Sheva. And they call the well that we call today the well of Abraham, Bir Asaba, the well of Sheva, Beersheba, Bir Asaba, Beersheba. The Bible critics have always said, you see, this is some sort of a mistake in the biblical text. You know, it listed twice by accident or something like that. But it's actually an example of how the Bible is very exact. There's Beersheba and there's Sheva. It may be the same well, or it may be two different wells that are in the same area, but they both have the same name, but for two different reasons. Perhaps that is the well that Abraham dug, and this is the well that Isaac dug. Wow. Insane. 70 meters. This camp, he raised his two boys, Esau and Jacob. And Esau became a hunter. Esau would go all the way out into the desert and he would hunt probably ibexes. That's the kind of animals that one might hunt in this area. And Jacob, it says he was ish chalak, he was a smooth person. In other words, Esau was very hairy, he was very rough. In fact, the name Esau in Hebrew, it means well done, asui. Like if you order meat, right? If you want it well done, you ask for asui tov, well done, right? It should be well done. So something which is fully cooked, fully formed, it's called asui. And Esau, it comes from the same root because when Esau was born, he was already covered with hair. He was red-headed, red complexioned. He looked like a little man coming out of the womb. Yaakov, Jacob, was smooth, he was soft.
Slick.
It says he was Yoshev Ohalim, he would sit in the tents, which means he was around the women, he was around the home life more. One day, Esau goes out to the field hunting. And you can imagine in this desert environment, in the heat, he probably got dehydrated, he's probably used all of his energy. He's chasing after the ibexes, over the mountains, through the valleys. And he comes back from the hunt exhausted. And he feels like he's going to die. If he doesn't eat and drink, he's going to die. His energy is spent. And he finds his brother, Jacob, who is the one who sits in the tent, the one who's so smooth and soft and nice. He finds him doing what? Cooking a pot of lentils, of red lentils. The rabbis in the Talmud say that is the day that Abraham, their grandfather, died and was buried that day. And while the whole other family was dealing with mourning their grandfather, Abraham, who died, Esau was like, get me out of here, I want to go hunt, I want to go enjoy. And the reason Jacob was personally cooking a pot of lentils is because in the Jewish tradition we serve lentils to mourners.
Yeah.
Till this day, at the meal that's served to people who are in the 7 days of mourning, what's called the Sheva, we serve them certain traditional foods, including eggs and lentils, which are round foods that remind us that life is a cycle. And just like it ends, it begins, and it ends, and it begins. And even though right now you feel like the world is over, that your father or your loved one died, don't forget that life continues. There's the next generation, and it always has been this way and always will be that way. And so Jacob is cooking a pot of red lentils to serve to his father, who's mourning for his father, Abraham. And what is Esau doing? He's out hunting. He says to him, please, please pour me some of that red stuff. Pour me out some of that red stuff you're cooking before I die. You want the stew? I want something from you. Sell me your birthright. And Esau says, what good is a birthright if I die? I'm gonna die. So give me the stew and you can have my birthright. Most young people, especially the Esau types who are into hunting, and they think they're gonna live forever, and they're like, what do I need a birthright when I'm 80 years old? Here now. He's thinking about here now. Here now, I'm hungry, I want. And Jacob, who's the same age as him, they're twins, is already thinking about what's gonna be 50, 80, 100 years from now. And even, of course, he is thinking about thousands of years into the future. Esau, he doesn't care about the birthright. He says, what do I need? What's a birthright to me? I'm hungry now, give me food. And Jacob sells him the birthright in exchange for a pot of lentils.
It seems like Esau was in a desperate situation, and so did Jacob take advantage of him? Sort of, he made a contract when Esau was under distress?
You could say that he took advantage of him, or you could say that Jacob had foresight to understand what's important, what's truly important. And Jacob understood that his father is caught up in the charm of his brother Esau. And Jacob isn't in a place to go tell his father, listen, father, don't be so charmed by Esau. It's all a show. You don't know how he really is. But what he can do is he can look for an opportunity. And essentially what he did is he used Esau's own bad traits to take away his birthright. He didn't set up some elaborate scheme. He just waited for the opportunity when Esau, through his own bad traits, went out hunting, probably didn't take any water because he probably said, what do I need? Didn't take any food because he said, I'm so strong. And when he came back, collapsed, feeling like he's gonna die, and said, please give me your food. Please give me your food. So Jacob said, okay, give me the birthright. Their father Isaac naturally was more drawn towards his son Esau, because think about Isaac's point of view. He's trying to stake out a life in this desert with enemies like frenemies like Avimelech, who is sort of his friend and sort of his enemy nearby. And he's trying to establish himself as an independent entity. Which son is he naturally going to see more as the one that he can depend on to carry on his line?
Esau.
Right, not the one who sits in the tent with the women who's so nice and sweet. The one who's tough and rough and goes out and hunts and brings back animals. That's the one who Isaac feels could be the one who will carry on my legacy in the world. And because of that, when the day comes when Isaac realizes he's getting old and he doesn't know how long he has to live, he wants to bless his two sons. And his plan is to give the main blessing to his son Esau and the secondary blessing to his son Jacob. And he says to Esau, listen, my son, I plan to bless you, and in order to bless you, I want to be in the best mood so I can give the best, strongest blessing. And nothing puts me in a better mood than when you come back from the hunt with the animals that you hunted and you cook it for me. And he's sort of implying maybe that it shows your strength and it makes me feel confident that my son brought me this food, right? So please go out and hunt and cook me up some meat that you hunt and prepare it for me, and I'll eat it, and then I will bless you when I'm in that right state of mind. Well, Esau's mother, who's also Jacob's mother, Rebecca, she overhears this discussion, and she, as the woman, as the mother, that often mothers have a much deeper intuition and understanding of their children than the father does. The father often sees in the child what he wants to see.
Yeah.
He's going to grow big and he's going to be strong. He's going to go to this school. And he's going to get this kind of job.
This scholarship, that scholarship.
We already planned out their whole life before they were even born, right? But mothers they have the feminine intuition, and mothers see the child for what he is. generally speaking. And that perhaps is partially the case here, that although Isaac sees Esau as the one who's more strong, and he's the horse that you want to put your bet on, but Rebekah sees that Esau may be strong, but he's also boastful. He's also arrogant. And Jacob may be soft, and he may be smooth, and he may sit in the tent, but he's also God-fearing. He's also trustworthy. And Rebekah sees Jacob as a more fitting heir to be the one who will carry on the legacy of Abraham and Isaac and be the one to ultimately found the people of Israel.
Maybe Esau has this view because he brings home all the food, so he relies on himself, where Jacob is in a tent and he has to rely on something else other than himself. So maybe he has to rely on God. If he doesn't rely on God, the food might not come. Esau says to himself, I don't need God, I can do it myself.
The one who goes out and conquers and does, it's often because he has an approach that says that if I don't do it, it will never happen, that I will save myself, right? So the question is, which comes first, the chicken or the egg? Obviously, the ultimate place that someone wants to reach is that they fully trust God, and at the same time, they fully understand that they have to act, but that they're not acting out of their own strength, but out of God's strength. That's the perfect synthesis that one should strive for. Rebekah hatches a plan. She says to Jacob, your brother Esau is out in the field hunting. It's going to take a few hours at least till he gets back. Go to the herd and bring me 2 goats. I'm going to slaughter them and I'm going to make from them food. It's going to taste very similar to the food that Esau would make. So Jacob walks into the tent of his father Isaac, disguised as Esau, with the goat skins strapped or somehow attached to his arms. And at that time, of course, Isaac is getting old, and the Bible tells us that he was going blind.
So Jacob drew close to Isaac, his father, who felt him and said, the voice is Jacob's voice, but the hands are Esau's hands. But he did not recognize him because his hands were hairy like the hands of Esau, his brother. So he blessed him. He said, you are indeed my son Esau. And he said, I am.
I don't want to say he's not lying, because he's certainly not being totally straight. He's deceiving his father. Someone like Jacob, who was such a righteous and holy person, even when he's forced to say an untruth, he says it in a way that it's not technically an untruth. Anochi Esav bechorecha, which you could translate it, I am Esav, your firstborn, or you could put the comma after the word anochi. If you put the comma after the word anochi, then what he really said, his father says to him, who are you? And he says, anochi, I am. Esav bincha bechorecha. Esav is your firstborn son. So when a righteous person like Jacob has no choice but to mislead, even in his misleading, he says it in a way that it's not technically untrue what he's saying.
It's all about where you put the comma.
It's all about when you put the comma. We see that Isaac is suspicious of Jacob. Isaac says, really? How did you come back so quick? And Jacob says, well, God blessed me. And that makes Isaac even more suspicious, because he's not used to hearing Esau say, God bless me. Esau would say, you should know, I ran and I climbed, and the gazelle almost got away, and I shot an arrow and I hit it from 1,000 meters. And that's how Esau would speak. So now Isaac is even more suspicious. He says, come close so that I can touch you, because he knows that even though he's blind, he can feel the difference between Jacob and Esau easily. One is smooth and one is rough and hairy. And he touches his arms and he feels the hair, and it feels like Esau.
He smelled the fragrance of his garments, and he blessed him. He said, see, the fragrance of my son is like the fragrance of the field which Hashem had blessed. And may God give you the dew of the heavens and the fatness of the earth, and abundant grain and wine.
So Isaac gives the blessing to Jacob. He blesses him that nations will serve him. He blesses him of the dew of the heavens and of the fat of the earth. He gives him these great and amazing blessings. And then Esau comes back from the field, having caught the game, and he prepares it. And just as Jacob left the tent, Esau comes into the tent carrying his platter of food for his father. And his father Isaac says,
"Who are you?" And he said, "I'm your firstborn son, Esau." Then Isaac trembled in a very great perplexity.
Isaac maybe doesn't know exactly what has happened yet, but what he understands with his spirit of divine inspiration, he understands that this is something which is happening from above.
"Where is the one who hunted game? Brought it to me, and I partook of all when you had not yet come, and I blessed him? Indeed, he shall remain blessed."
I don't know who that was that I blessed, but he's the one who's going to get blessed. And you know, some of the commentaries, they say, what does it mean, I don't know who it was? What does he think? He gave the blessing to some slave or to some, and is he really going to say he should be blessed? The commentaries say that when he says, I don't know who it was, what he means is, I always thought that Jacob is too soft. I always thought that he's too weak. I always thought that he doesn't know how to take what he wants. So I don't know who that Jacob was. He knows it's Jacob. Obviously he knows it's Jacob. Who else could it be? I don't know who that Jacob was, but that Jacob will be blessed. That Jacob, I can also understand him.
He says, "You have the voice of Jacob, but you have the hands of Esau." And in my mind it says, oh, you have the God-fearing, the humility of Jacob, but you can also do what Esau does with your hands.
Right.
So he says, you have the hands of Esau and the voice.
And that put him at ease that Jacob has the best of both worlds and is the one who will carry on his prophetic and godly mission in this world to establish the people of Israel. And of course, Esau is now furious.
"Bless me too, father." But he said, "Your brother came with cleverness and took your blessing." He said, "Is it because his name was called Jacob that he outwitted me these 2 times? He took away my birthright, and see, now he took away my blessing?"
Esau makes a silent oath to himself that I will not forget this day. When the day comes when our father Isaac dies, after the funeral, when we bury him, I'm going to track down Jacob and I'm going to kill him. I'm going to take back my birthright because I will be the only one left. Their mother Rebecca, she finds out that Esau has plans to kill her son Jacob, and she realizes she needs to get Jacob far away, as far away as she could. She tells her husband Jacob, "You know, Esau married these local Canaanite girls and I can't stand them. I don't want Jacob to marry the Canaanite girls. Could you maybe send him to the house of my family where he could marry someone from our people?" So Isaac calls Jacob into his tent and says, "I want you to go back to your mother's family, to your uncle Laban, and I want you to find a wife." And so Jacob sets out on a journey from this place, from Beersheba, and he starts to travel north all the way through the land of Israel, all the way towards Haran in southern Turkey, northern Syria. Look at that beautiful green plant growing in the middle of all these weeds. You see this? Isn't it strange that everything else is dry and dead and this is alive?
It's flourishing.
This is called maluach. What's maluach mean in Hebrew?
It's salty.
Salty, right?
Yeah.
The maluach can live on salt water, and because of that, if you eat it, I say it tastes like a salty green apple. Like, you know that taste of the peel of a green apple?
Yeah.
It tastes like you took that peel of a green apple and put salt. Try it. Did I nail that flavor?
Exactly. The texture, once I bit into it, instantaneously.
The salt is insane.
Yeah.
Right?
It's like super salty.
There's another kind of maluach that has much bigger leaves. If you take those leaves and you fry them in oil, It tastes exactly like potato chips
Oh wow.
with the salt on it already.
Wow, that must be amazing.
Healthiest potato chip in the world. Imagine Jacob, a young man who was born and raised in the desert in and around Beersheba. His entire life, he never left the land of Israel. And now he finds himself hiking through this area, through the mountain range of Hebron. And he knows that he's leaving the land of Israel and he doesn't know when he's going to come back. Jacob, it would have taken him several days perhaps to travel this route. For us, it's going to take about 2 hours. From this point in Bethel, we're close enough to Jerusalem that we can see Jerusalem. Jacob is traveling from Beersheba, he's traveling south. He traveled past Hebron like we did, past Bethlehem. He traveled past Jerusalem, and he was probably hoping to get further north before he went to sleep, and for whatever reason got caught out in the open when the sun set before he expected it to. There were known routes, you travel a day's journey from this station to that station, but Yaakov either somehow misjudged the amount of time, or maybe took an alternate route, or maybe, like some commentaries say, that God caused the sun to set early in order for him to stop at that place. And so he found himself now, as the sun is setting on him in the dark, just outside of the Canaanite city of Luz. What does Luz mean? Do you know by any chance? It's not a common word, but...
Nuts?
Luz is a nut. Usually in modern Hebrew we use luz to speak about hazelnuts, right? But actually the word luz can be any kind of nut. And it seems that most specifically, it refers to almonds. Even though the almond tree has its own name, which is shaked, but in other Semitic languages, for example, in Arabic, the word for almond is lauz. Lauz, like luz, right? So it seems that luz specifically means almonds. And look, here we have an almond tree growing. And there are almonds on the tree. You see, it looks like a little fuzzy apricot. But if you open it up, inside there's the seed, and then inside the seed is the fruit of the almond. It could be that the reason for the original Canaanite name of the city being Luz is because this is an area where they grow almonds. And here they grow here till today. There is the almond, but this is a fresh almond, I should say. The name of the almond is shaked, and do you know what shaked means? You're studying in yeshiva, right?
Yeah.
So sometimes they tell the students that they need to study Torah with shkida.
Oh, I thought you were going to say shake it.
Not shake it. That means be quiet. No, they tell the students that they have to study with shkida. Shkida, it means alacrity. Like
the first one.
To do it, to be there early, to give everything you have. Shkida, it means alacrity. To do it to be first and energetic, right?
Okay.
So that's what shaked means. Shaked means the tree which is the first to jump out. The fig is not the shaked. The fig still needs another month or two till it will be ripe.
It's like the Chabadnik. It comes at 10 a.m. to pray.
But the almond wakes up at dance. It's the first thing in the morning, and it's ready. So that's why it's called shaked.
He encountered the place and spent the night there because the sun had set. He took from the stones of the place which he arranged around his head and lay down in that place.
And just like the sun sets quicker than you think on Jacob, it's going to set quicker than we think on us, because it's actually also part of the geography of this place that you think you have more sunlight and then it disappears. That's Tel Aviv. Okay? So When the sun hits there, it hits the ocean. You see the water, the sun reflecting off the water?
Yeah.
When the sun gets there, it's down. So you think you have light, but then it goes beyond the horizon and boom, it gets dark within 5 minutes. It doesn't say anywhere that it's a miracle. Some have interpreted it as perhaps God caused the sun to set early. I'm saying that it doesn't have to be that that's the explanation. There could also be perhaps just a simple geographical reason why it was that way, that the sun set earlier than he expected, because actually you're going to see when we're here, it feels like you have another half an hour of daylight or another hour, and then all of a sudden, within a window of a few minutes, boom.
And behold, angels of God were ascending and descending on it. And behold, Hashem was standing over him, and he said, I am Hashem, God of Abraham your father, and the God of Isaac.
Jacob understands from this dream that the place where he was lying is none other than Sha'ar HaShamayim, the gate to heaven. And guess what? We're not in Jerusalem. We're not in the Temple Mount. We are a drive of about 45 minutes. With our traffic, it was over an hour. So many Jews. Yaakov Avinu did too good of a job.
If only if Esau could have.
God forbid, don't say that. Jacob calls this the gate of heaven, and yet look, we're here all by ourselves. Go to the Temple Mount, and there are millions of people every year coming to pray, and come here, and you see a bus come and a bus leave, but we no longer see this as the gate of heaven. When you studied in Jewish day school, when they taught you that Jacob laid down and had a dream with a ladder with the angels going up and down, where did they tell you that it happened?
It's in the Temple Mount, Beit, in Yerushalayim.
Everyone says it happened on the Temple Mount. So why am I telling you that it happened here? Everything that I'm going to tell you is a combination of three sources. Source number one is Rashi, the great medieval Jewish commentator on the Torah. Source number two is Professor Zev Vilnai, who was a great scholar of the land of Israel. And source number three is Professor Chagi Ben Artzi, who happens to be the brother-in-law of Bibi Netanyahu and the brother of Sarah Netanyahu. Professor Zev Vilnai was a great scholar of all the land of Israel and wrote volumes of guidebooks all about sites from Israel and went looking for many biblical sites. He came to this hilltop and he found here this domed building that we're standing inside. So Professor Vilnai asked the local inhabitants, what is the name of this dome? And they told him it's called Mikam Sheikh Abdullah, the place of Sheikh Abdullah. So he thought to himself, maybe it was some Muslim holy man, or maybe it was a great warrior who won a battle here, or some miracle happened here to a Muslim by the name of Sheikh Abdullah. Then came, hundreds of years later, the Crusaders. In 1099, the Crusaders arrived in the land of Israel. So we're talking about the late 600s till 1099. It's a few hundred years, right? The Crusaders came here and they added a chapel, a Christian chapel, onto this building. So Professor Zev Vilnai said to himself, hold on one second. If it's let's say a Jewish site, right? We could understand why the Muslims might want to mark a Jewish site, because all the prophets from the Torah are holy also to Muslims. And we can understand why the Christians would want to mark that site, because all the prophets in the Torah and in the Hebrew Tanach are holy to Christians as well. But if it's a place of Sheikh Abdullah, why would the Crusaders hear the story of Sheikh Abdullah and say, wow, Sheikh Abdullah is here? We have to add a chapel. We want to pray in the place of Sheikh Abdullah. If something happened on this hilltop, and the Muslims came and said, we must mark this. And then hundreds of years later, the Christians came and said, we must mark this. What do Christians and Muslims have in common? They have in common that they both believe in all or most of the prophets of the Jewish scriptures. They believe in Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Moses, David. What Bible story could be marked here other than Jacob's dream? Why? Because we are standing in the vicinity of ancient Bethel, ancient Luz. It's just on the next hilltop over. This is on the ancient route where Jacob would have been traveling. And how fit for this to be the place where Jacob had his dream, and for the Muslims to hear about it and build a mosque, and for the Christians to hear about it and build a chapel. And then Professor Zev Vilnai realized one more thing, which is all throughout the Torah, Jacob is called God's servant. Al tira avdi Yaakov. Don't be afraid, my servant Jacob. Or Yaakov avdi, Jacob my servant. We have that term, Jacob my servant, all throughout the Torah. Well, what does Abdullah mean? Abdullah?
Servant.
Abd, Eved, Allah, the servant of God. Abdullah. Okay. So Professor Zev Vilnai proposed the following way to test his hypothesis. But guys, you have to bear with me, because if you want to understand this, it's a little bit convoluted, but it is genius. It's genius. Professor Zev Vilnai said, if this is the place of Jacob's dream, this is also the place where Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, built a pagan temple with a golden calf in it. Who is Jeroboam? Remember, who was the greatest king that Israel ever had? As far as territory, as far as power, as far as unifying everybody, that would have been Solomon, right? He had ships going out from Elat. He had alliances all over the world. He married wives for political alliances with everyone all over the world. In his time, he was the greatest. But as soon as he passed away, his kingdom fell apart. Why? He had a son named Rehoboam, or in English, Rehoboam. And Rehoboam was not as strong as his father. And when Rehoboam came to rule over all the tribes of Israel, the tribes of Judah accepted him. They said, you're Solomon's son, and you're our king. And you're from our tribe, Judah, you're our king. But the northern tribes, the 10 tribes, they weren't so quick to accept him. They said to him, why should we let you be the king? Your father charges very high taxes. He had very ambitious policies. He made alliances all over the world. It's all great, it's all nice. He built this great temple, but what? It cost us a lot of money, a lot of taxes. Our children had to go be indentured servants to work in all his projects and his armies and his building. We want a more modest policy now. We want to go back to the old ways, the way it was when we had judges, when every person did what was right in their own eyes, when things were more low-key. We don't want this fancy modern kingdom. We want the old type of kingdom. So they asked Jeroboam, are you going to go back to old ways, or are you going to be like your father? He said, if my father chastised you with sticks, I will chastise you with scorpions. What's he saying? I will be much more tough than my father. He said, my little pinky is thicker than your guy's thigh bones or your waist, okay? Basically saying, you don't know how tough I am. And he thought that by saying how tough he is, he's going to get the people to follow after him. But the people said, in that case, go home to your tent, son of David, we don't want you. And they appointed a king by the name of Jeroboam, or in Hebrew, Yeravam ben Nevat. And they thought that Jeroboam was very righteous and very holy, and actually everyone thought that. In fact, the prophet Achia Hashiloni, Achia the Silonite from Shiloh, told the people that he should be the king, and he anointed him as king. So he even had the approbation of the prophet of that time. And the people appointed him as king, thinking, yes, he's not going to do everything the way David and Solomon did. He's going to go back to more humble ways, but probably more authentic ways. As soon as Jeroboam was crowned, what did he do? He told them, we're going to build 2 temples. We're going to build one temple in Bethel, which is here, and one temple in Dan, all the way in the north of the kingdom. And the people said, 2 temples, you know what? That's not so bad actually, because in the old days, before Solomon unified the worship only in Jerusalem, we brought sacrifices wherever we want. Dan had an altar in Dan, like we saw the altar of Samson's parents. There were altars probably here in Bethel. There were altars in Hebron and Beersheba. All over the land, there were local altars, and it was okay, because until the temple is built, you can build an altar anywhere you want. So he said, 2 temples, great. And then he said, and in each one of them, I want you to place a golden calf.
They're facing each other.
And he placed 2 golden calves, and he said the exact same words that were said in the desert when the Jews worshiped the golden calf. These are your gods, O Israel, that took you out of the land of Egypt. So he brought the people back to the same idolatry of the golden calf.
So he went too far back. They wanted somewhat back, not back to...
They weren't expecting quite that far back. Why did Jeroboam choose these 2 locations, Dan and Bethel? Dan he chose because, look in the book of Judges, it says that there was a temple in Dan that the people would travel to all the days that the tabernacle was in Shiloh. The people would walk right past Shiloh and go to Dan because that was considered a more powerful cultic site where they would go worship. And why Bethel? Because Bethel, the Torah itself says about this place, Zeh Shar HaShamayim, this is the gate of heaven. Jeroboam is essentially saying, Solomon, the house of David with their upstart temple in Jerusalem. Who ever heard of Jerusalem before? Where did our ancestors worship? In Jerusalem? No, they worshipped in Beersheba, in Hebron, in Bethel, in Shiloh, in Dan, in Mount Gerizim, in Shechem. That's where our ancestors worship. Why did David and Solomon come and build a temple in Jerusalem? What were they thinking? I am going to build you temples like the good old days. And it's a claim to authenticity. So Professor Zev Vilnai said, if this is the site of Jacob's dream, you should find on this hilltop the temple of Jeroboam. You notice here there's already paving stones. We're entering something that was built, right?
Yep. I see a wall.
This is a wall. This is a built wall. You see that the wall, it goes to this corner, past the bush here. It continues along this way, and then it goes this way, out past that tree, and this way, and then it comes back here. And you can see from these stones, this is what's called a casemate wall. It's not meant to build a small farmhouse. When you see this kind of wall, something monumental was built here. Some have theorized that this could be the temple of Jeroboam. The size and dimensions of this structure have been measured to be similar to the size and dimensions of the tabernacle. And so if Jeroboam is indeed making a claim to go back to the old ways, he would have built it to feel similar to the Mishkan, the tabernacle. The tabernacle was 50 cubits by 100 cubits, and this is of similar dimensions. Number 2, look over there, you see there's a raised hilltop?
I do.
Well, the Bible says that Jeroboam built at his temple a bama, a raised platform. From there, he would observe the sacrifices, and there was the golden calf. It's possible that that hilltop is left from the raised area, which was part of the temple of Jeroboam. I'm going to give you another piece of circumstantial evidence, which is here. A new boy king by the name of Josiah arises in Judah. The Bible tells us in the book of Kings how Josiah went around the country, and at least he went to Beersheba, and there was a pagan altar, and he destroyed it. He went all over the country, uprooting, smashing, destroying everything pagan. He comes to this place, he smashes, he burns, he destroys, and you can imagine him in a fit of zeal, sweating, puffing and puffing. And the Bible says, and then when he was done, he looked all around the mountain to see what else is left to be done. And what did he see? He saw that in the side of the mountain there were tombs. Why do you think there would be tombs under the mountain where Jeroboam built his pagan temple? When you go to Jerusalem, right outside the walls of the temple, you have the most prestigious Jewish cemetery in the world.
Hazeitim.
And Jews from all over the world want to be buried there. They'll pay their entire fortune that after they die, they should be buried on Mount of Olives because they want to be buried under the seat of the divine presence. Well, there were Israelites who were such true believers at Jeroboam's temple that they want to be buried right underneath the temple of Jeroboam, just like Jews, they want to be buried right under the Temple Mount. Here in the side of the hilltop, this is a tomb from the time of Jeroboam. If you walk around this hilltop, there are maybe 20 or 30 something caves. He saw those tombs and he ordered that the bones be pulled out of those tombs, brought to the high place and burned. There is one more piece of evidence, circumstantial evidence, but evidence that may link this site to the temple of Jeroboam. And if it's the temple of Jeroboam, to the site of Jacob's dream. Through these trees is a guard tower. This guard tower is connected to a series of walls. You can see some remnant of the walls down here. And these walls and towers encompass this entire hilltop, which means that whatever was on this hilltop was so important that they built walls and towers all around to protect it from attack. So what do we have now? We have a site which is in the approximate area where you would expect Jacob to have his dream. We are standing here opposite what today is the Arab village called Beit on the opposite hilltop, which is where the city of Beit El was. And Jacob was on the road outside the city. So we're in the right area. We have a monumental structure in the approximate dimensions that you would expect Jeroboam to build his pagan temple. You have the raised altar area in the back, which could be the high place that's mentioned. And we have guard towers all around, showing that it was very important. And we have the tombs at the base of the mountain, exactly as described in the book of Kings, when Josiah, king of Judah, came and took the bones out of the caves and crushed them on the altar of Jeroboam. We have a site called Makam Sheikh Abdullah, the servant of God, which was built by the Muslims and affirmed by the Christians. So when we put all of this together, it's very possible that this is the hilltop where Jacob had his dream, and Jeroboam built his temple here as a claim to greater authenticity even than the temple in Jerusalem.
It's an incredible spot. From just looking, you can see Jerusalem, you can see the sea, you can see westward, eastward, northern. It's incredible. The ground upon which you are lying, to you I will give it, and to your descendants. Your offspring shall be as the dust of the earth, and you shall spread out powerfully westward, eastward, northward, and southward. And all the families of the earth shall bless themselves by you and by your offspring.
You see the mountain range in the haze?
That's Jordan Valley.
That's in Jordan. Those mountains are in Jordan.
Yeah.
So you can see actually across from Jordan to the Mediterranean from this same hilltop. God said to Jacob, look to the north, the south, the east, and the west. All the land you see I will give you, and you can see across the entire country here. From his childhood in Beersheba, he runs away to set off on the journey which will ultimately lead him from being little Jacob, the soft man, the smooth man who sits in the tent, to being Yisrael, Israel, the one who struggles with angels, or some might interpret it, struggles with God. Both translations could work, and succeeds. He becomes the father to 12 sons, each of which becomes a tribe, which all together become the nation of Israel, which become the people of Israel, which today we are descendants from, and we are back here in this land, in the place where God said to him, look to the north, to the south, to the east, and to the west. All the land that you see I will give to you and to your descendants. You take these steps like a soldier.
What do you mean? How do swords take steps?
Sometimes the person who does the most horrible act is the one who claims authenticity, is the one who justifies their act by saying, I'm doing it the original way, the real way. I'm going back to authenticity. And sometimes the person who seems to be innovating, like Solomon, who seemingly innovated He built a big temple in Jerusalem. He made alliances. He did things that were never done before. Sometimes that person who seems to be the one who's going on a new way is actually the one who is most faithfully upholding the spirit of the old way.
Right.
And sometimes the one who is faithfully upholding the form of the old way is violating the spirit of the old way, because the spirit of the old way requires also not to change, but to apply it to the next situation and the next situation and the next situation. And if you continue to act the old way, when the Torah demands you to act in the new way, then not only are you not upholding the tradition, you're actually violating the Torah.
It's like growing up. You're a child, then you're adolescent, then you're an adult. So you're like, oh, I want to be authentic, my authentic self when I was first born. I want to go back. Like, no.
Right, it's absurd.
You have to keep continuing forward, but with the same spirit.